Hi, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Lovecast. You are listening to episode 117, which is titled, Ignorance is Unconsciousness to What We Already Know. Let me repeat that. This one's going to be entitled, Ignorance is Unconsciousness to What We Already Know. Yeah, I'm a fan of that title. I'm a real big fan of that title because there is a lot. You need to really think about that title. There's a lot being said in that title. And I'd love to claim credit for that, but actually that title comes from a dear friend of mine who's actually been on this podcast previously. His name is Bobby Downs, and I did a 2-part conversation with him, and it's here on the podcast just a few episodes ago. We did 2 parts. So check that out if you haven't listened to that. He is a fantastic human being. I believe everybody should know about and know that he's got a great story. But anyway, I was actually doing a live conversation in a Facebook group that I'm a part of called Uprooting from the Poverty Mindset, and Bobby and I were dialoguing there, and Bobby came up with that quote because we were talking about a truth that I want to share with you today here on this podcast. But that is the quote, which is fantastic. Ignorance is unconsciousness to what we already know. So I want to talk about that. Let me tell you, to just kind of give you a little bit of context with this. But before I do that, I just want to just say again, I'm really glad that these podcast episodes have been helpful to you. I've actually heard from a number of people who have listened over the last few weeks, especially with all the turmoil that is going on in the United States and also even around the world. We live in a global society, so some of the same issues are affecting all of us around the world. But specifically here in the States, I'm really glad to hear that, just some of the perspectives that I know that some of the things I share here on this podcast aren't exactly in line with what we're hearing. So I appreciate your patience and also your just open-mindedness as you listen to this, your open-mindedness to consider maybe a different paradigm or different angle to things than what you may normally hear about. I really appreciate your grace and and your openness to that, because I think that makes a huge difference to all of us as we're having these really important conversations. Appreciate you giving me the benefit of the doubt and just being very gracious in that way. And I appreciate the comment. Hearing from you guys really helps me know that this conversation is important to you and it's needed, and it really kind of spurs me to continue in a certain direction. So I really, that feedback is helpful for me. It's needed. It's something I really appreciate. So thank you guys. Now, with that said, I want to set up today's conversation. I'm not going to share a lot today because I think there's just a few things to say, but they will speak for themselves. And I think you can really unpack them for quite some time, So with that said, I had an interesting... I had a friend who was, obviously just like all of us, has been going through and trying to process what in the world is happening in our society, what's going on, why is 2020 such a tumultuous year, all of these kinds of things. And and obviously if you've been paying attention to, my podcast, the things I shared just about, how deceptive our media, the American media, is just... It's by design very faulty. It's designed for clickbait. It's really yellow journalism. We lost journalism in its purest form many years ago. So a lot of this is just yellow journalism, clickbait. It's meant to cause up, to attract eyes and viewership. And that really, what does that is, trying to sensationalize and use fear and rage as tactics to stir up people. This is a very common tactic that's used by the media all the time. So nothing new there, but it can be maddening when people, because a lot of people aren't conscious of that. They know that at some level, but when there's tumultuous times, what do people do to try to be informed? Yeah, they turn the media on, they turn the news on, and they are trying to get some information, okay, from the media. And I was sharing some information, just much of the information that we're hearing about the virus going on, just absolutely unfounded, not rooted in science. I know that's a controversial proposition, but there's a lot more, and I definitely want to eventually get to that. But so much of what's being said and assumed in the media, specifically about this virus, okay, is really not rooted in any science. It's actually rooted in a lot of myth, as fear is. Most fear is rooted in misunderstanding, okay? Now, I pointed some of those things out in my previous podcast, and of course, so I had a friend listen to one of those episodes, and she asked me a really good question that I believe many of us are asking, and I want to address the root of that question. Okay, I want to address the root of that question here in this podcast episode, okay? So here's the question. The question was, I don't want to be one given to conspiracy theories, okay? And this is what my friend was saying. There's and the reason conspiracy theories, okay, because that term, by the way, is thrown out there a lot to disregard. As soon as somebody says, well, that's a conspiracy theory, then you don't even have to think about it. You don't have to pay attention to what that person is saying, because it's a conspiracy theory, which automatically means, now no one really says this, that there's just no truth to what's being shared. Complete misinformation. So my friend was saying that, she doesn't want to be kind of lumped in with that or given to that. And I totally understand that. I mean, we all have known people that get caught up in those rabbit trails, just, looking for conspiracies everywhere and, not having a sense of what's real. And I think that's what's disturbing, that was disturbing to my friend. That's what's disturbing sometimes, is when you see these people that are just caught up in conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory. It's like they have no sense. But here's a point I want to make about that, though. The reason that so many people are afraid of being one of those conspiracy theorists is because it seems like it's an ungroundedness, or not. It's not being aware of what's real. It's a break from reality. And so people kind of look at those folks and go, I don't want to be one of those people that just are given to conspiracy theories, right? So, and that makes sense, because we don't want to be ungrounded. And sometimes we view those folks as being ungrounded. And I totally get that. But a mistake would be to then attach your sense of reality to yellow journalism, which, I know this term is thrown out there a lot, but really is fake news. It's like it's completely fictitious. The narratives are fictitious. They use, there's so many things I could say about that, but that's equally as problematic as being a conspiracy theorist, is just attaching just going along with what is being told to you by the quote unquote, reputable sources on the mainstream media, because they're not reputable. So again, so my friend understands this and was like, look, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist like some of my family was, which were unstable. But I also don't want to be one of these just kind of blind sheep that just listen and believe, automatically hook, line, and sinker, believe everything they hear on the news and buy into the perspectives and all that kind of thing, because she can recognize these aren't healthy. And plus, it just doesn't even add up. It doesn't even make sense. Think about this for a moment. Does it make any sense to be told, I was just listening to the news the other day, how dangerous it is, to the president was having a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and how dangerous that is and reckless it is to gather people together for a rally. And yet at the same time, when people were showing up at this rally to protest, and not only that, other protests going on, that there was no mention of the danger to their health. And many of these protesters, do you really think they're, these folks who are protesting, and a lot of the folks who are resorting to violence, even inside the zone in Seattle, where they're have taken over a 6-block zone in the middle of Seattle, some of the media's coverage of that, nobody's really talking about the health dangers, but nobody's practicing social distancing. They said it was like a carnival and festival kind of atmosphere in this zone in Seattle, and the media is just not talking about that as a health risk, because again, it doesn't fit the agenda. Even because if it was really a health risk and they really knew that and believed that themselves, they would be talking about that. So it only applies to certain groups, certain timing. And anybody, doesn't matter what. This isn't about politics. This isn't about what side of the aisle you're on. Anybody with just an ounce of objectivity can see that pretty clearly, that this is not, it doesn't add up. I mean, even from one day, you have a scientist with the World Health Organization that comes out and says, we still, after all this time, have no evidence that asymptomatic people can spread the coronavirus, which would be completely consistent with how viruses work. People who are asymptomatic and not sick, you are not contagious. You cannot spread viruses unless you're sick. That's normative. Now, there was a suggestion put out that it's possible for people to spread this virus even though they were asymptomatic. Now, that is an extraordinary statement that would require a complete break in protocol in how viruses work. But they didn't know. They said, well, we don't know. That could be happening. So that was the rationale behind the lockdown. That's why everyone should stay home, because if you go out, you could spread it, because they didn't know if you could spread this virus asymptomatically. Now, that would be extraordinary if you could. So this scientist with the World Health Organization came out just the other day and said, we still don't have any evidence that says asymptomatic spread happens. There's no scientific studies that show, they have not been able to determine if asymptomatic people can spread the virus, which means it is acting the way all viruses act, which is it only becomes contagious when your body is sick and you are having a response, and then of course through those droplets in the air, then it becomes contagious. But if you are not contagious, if you are not sick and having symptoms, then there is no evidence that you can spread this virus. That is completely normative to how all viruses work. We already know this. So that's what the World Health Organization said. And yet then they had to backtrack on that 2 days later because of political pressure, because that was the rationale behind the entire lockdown, was that we could spread this disease to people and that it could kill people even if you're asymptomatic. And so again, all the scientist was saying is, she wasn't saying, everyone should just go out and leave your house because you can't spread it. She was saying there is no science that supports the fact that you can spread it if you're asymptomatic. Now, that's important because that's normal. So the news media is telling you, and we have politicians that are out there saying, hey, you got to wear a mask and you have to stay home because you can spread it to people unknowingly if you're asymptomatic. And that has not been demonstrated. There is no proof for that. There is no evidence for that. There's no science behind it. And how many times do you hear in the news people emphatically saying you can spread it when that has not even been established? Because that would be an extraordinary claim. That would be extraordinary because viruses aren't spread that way. They just simply are not spread that way. This is some of those things that, when people start paying attention, they're going, but this, and then the World Health Organization comes out and there's a scientist that says, there's still no evidence that shows it spreads asymptomatically. And then a higher up comes out and says, well, don't rush to conclusions because we think it still could be, except of course, there's still no evidence for it. So this is maddening to a lot of people. And so my friend said, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what's real. How do you know what to believe when even the World Health Organization contradicts themselves? When some politicians will cheer people being out in the street and advocate for people to celebrate and protest out in the street, and then turn around and say it's too dangerous to have a rally. Like, how do you think this is maddening? Or businesses can't be open because it's too dangerous, yet you can rally in the streets, or that people can have protests and no problem. I mean, there's no talk about selfishness or spreading the disease with those. This is inconsistent logic. It's just inconsistent. So my friend again was commenting, like, how do we know what to believe? How do we know what's real? And I think it's a great question. Because whenever there's tumultuous times, when there's upheaval, the question does come down to it. How do we know what to believe? How do we know? And I want to make a statement, okay? I want to make a statement. And this is an important, I believe this to be a really important statement that I want you to, you may dismiss it initially, but I really do believe in it. I think it's something I want you to consider. Okay. I'm convinced that one of the biggest issues, all of our problems as a human species, is rooted in unconsciousness. I'm just convinced of it. It's unconsciousness. It's a lack of awareness to what is, and being itself. So it's a lack of awareness of being. I'm convinced. I believe that the fabric of reality is love. That the substance of love is literally what has made the entire universe manifest, okay? So when we're not aware, when we're unconscious to reality, this is where all the problems and the breakdowns in our own lives and in our societies come from, okay? And that's what and then the ego, then we have an egoic construct. Now, I'm not somebody who demonizes the ego or think the ego is all bad. We actually need an ego to have a human experience. So the human experience, what gives us the ability to have a human experience, is our egoic nature, our egoic state, okay? Now, if we are unconscious to our true self, however, the ego becomes a cruel slave master. All right. Did you hear that? Let me say that again. If we are unconscious to our true and highest self, our ego becomes something we're enslaved to. It becomes a slave master that controls us. We have and it really then we're being under the control of something that's not who we are. We're under the control of something false. Okay. Now there's these egoic states, and those of you who know me know that I'm a huge fan of Mary Magdalene and the Magdalene kind of way, and I won't get into that. That's something I talk about on. I used to be I'm no longer a part of a podcast called The Heretic Happy Hour, which is a podcast I used to be a part of. My publisher put that on, and I've since, wrapped my time up there. But one of the things that's kind of a joke on that podcast, one of the things I would talk about a lot on that podcast is the heritage, specifically in relation to the early church and Christianity, the formation of Christianity, is the influence and the importance of the person of Mary Magdalene and really her kind of teaching. And so in her she actually had a gospel attributed to her, and that was a very influential perspective that she shared that was very different than the other male disciples. And she influenced a lot of communities. But something that she taught, and this is also contained in her gospel, is that the ego really has kind of seven dynamics or seven manifestations of the ego, okay? And these aren't good or bad, but they're just realities of the ego. And of course, if we're unconscious to who we truly are, then these can become negative. They can become problematic, okay? So one of the states of the ego, according to this tradition, one of the states of the ego is ignorance. Ignorance, yeah. It's an egoic state of ignorance. So ignorance is, again, now when you have to have a human experience, we're going to be ignorant of a lot of things. That's why we grow up. When you're a baby, what do you know about the world? Nothing. You're pretty ignorant of lots of things. And as we grow up, we learn information and, that kind of thing. But I want to make a proposition to you, okay? Specifically, if you are feeling like, I don't know what to believe, here's what I want to say to you. You already know everything. Yeah, let me say, do you hear me when I say this? You already know everything. And this goes back to the title of this podcast, and it's a quote from my friend Bobby. I really wanted to bring it home. Ignorance is unconsciousness to what we already know. I believe, and this is where I'm coming from, I believe at the level of being, we actually know everything. Everything we need to know, everything that is, we actually have access to at the level of being. We are not people who are ignorant. Now, we may not have facts and information and knowledge. I get that. But But you can be all-knowing. And to be all-knowing, you have to go beyond the rational. I call it the trans-rational. You have to embrace the trans-rational, meaning you have to go beyond the mind. And we all have experienced this. There are things, now if you're listening to this, there are things that you know that you have no information for, that you cannot prove to anybody, but you just know it. That kind of knowing comes from the level of the heart, from the level of being. We must become people, and this is, I just feel very strongly about this. I want to implore us, if you're listening to this podcast, I want you to really understand it's important for us in this season and in this transition from the old world to a very new world that's being birthed. There's going to be a lot of upheaval, a lot of misinformation, a lot of manipulation. We're already seeing it. We must become people who are all-knowing, not ignorant. Because if you're ignorant, you're not going to know what to believe. You watch the news and you'll get taken one direction. You could watch CNN, get taken one direction. You can watch Fox News, you get taken to another direction. You don't know. And then the question is like, well, I don't know what's true. Maybe there's a level of truth in all of it. And I don't really know, and I don't trust anything. We have to move beyond that. People, we have to move beyond it. We have to become people who know deeply in the level of being, who know. And if you're used to operating from your mind, your intellect, your conscious, just facts and figures and what you read in books and what you do research on, that's all that you know. If you're one of those folks, you're going to struggle with this. You're going to really struggle with this because true knowledge and knowing goes beyond the rational. It's trans-rational. It goes into the spirit, the depths. This is where love is experienced. Awareness is experienced at this level. It's nothing that can be proven or disproven. It's not rooted in empirical knowledge. We got to become people like that. Otherwise, we're going to get taken for a ride. We're going to get manipulated by fear and lack and all the things that the media and the world system kind of operates from, which is just fear and lack. That's what keeps pulling people's puppet strings. Fear, lack, poverty mindset. These are things that exist in the mind, but to go beyond it, you have to go beyond the mind to the place of awareness, consciousness, and being. Okay? Now, with that said, I want to make this statement. So information or intuition. So let me talk about this intuition. We all have experienced this all-knowing state. Okay? It's called intuition. Now, it's a practice to get to know. So sometimes, we'll have this intuition. There's things that we know. There's a kind of for some people, it's in the gut. Deep in the gut, you'll feel it. This doesn't feel right. Now, sometimes that can also be from trauma. Trauma can, you can be triggered and then something won't feel right because you're traumatized and you're tapping into trauma energy. That's different, and I get that. But I'm not talking about that per se. I'm talking about just kind of like you'll have a knowing deep in your gut. For some people, it's in the gut. Some people, it's in your heart. It just depends on where it manifests in your body. But it's a deep inner place that already knows, and it will sometimes speak to you. It'll tell you, don't do that or do that. It's just a subtle knowing. And the more you get used to that, the more you kind of lean into that, the more you'll realize that is actually very trustworthy. You may not have intuition to go along with that sense, but it's intuition. And we all have experienced intuition, all of us. I've had intuition over the last several weeks that it's just a complete awareness of what's happening in our society. And yet, these are things I don't even talk about to people, because if I were to talk about them, they would say, well, that's quite extraordinary that you're saying this. Do you have any evidence for it? Or what are some of your empirical knowledge that backs up what you're saying? Now, I don't have that, so I don't say anything. It's an awareness for me. I have an awareness. I'm not confused about what's going on in the world. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm simply not up. I'm not like staying up at night going, what's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. I'm wondering, I know what's happening. I have a deep sense of, I know what's happening. I can see it. It's clear to me. And I just sit with it. And then that also allows me to do practices within my own my own disciplines, like my meditation practice, my visualization practices, I actually do things to respond to those things that are very helpful. And that's a whole other different conversation I could talk about, but it is how there is ways to respond in very effective and powerful ways. But I do that in my own practices. But it's my intuition that informs me of that. Okay, it's really important that if you're listening to this, that you become somebody who's well acquainted with your intuition, because that's just our intuition is an appendage of our spirit. Let me say that again. Our intuition is an appendage of our spirit. You got to learn to trust that. Okay, got to learn to trust. That's really important. Now, some of these things that I have had, like when I say like I'm aware of what's going on in society, yeah, I don't talk about this with people because people would be like, well, that sounds kind of out there, or I would get into a debate and I have to prove it, and I'm not even interested in that. I have no agenda of convincing anybody of anything. I want to be aware of what's happening. So at the level of intuition, I am simply aware. And what's crazy is that I have not been wrong one time. In the last several weeks, when all of this stuff was going on, I'm like, oh, yep, I see it. And then sure enough, a few days, a week later, that something will come out, and there will be the evidence in the actual knowledge of, oh yeah, I was right about that. And it's kind of blown me away because I'm going, well, yeah, I had intuition about that. I totally knew that was going on, even though I had no information about it until later. Super interesting. I am convinced that we all of us possess that ability. Every one of us. You, if you're listening to this, if you're a human being, if you're alive, you have a spirit, a consciousness, an essence, which is where your intuition is. And it's also, you have access to infinite knowledge. So when somebody feels ignorant or they don't know what's happening, again, going back to the title of this podcast, ignorance is simply unconsciousness to what we already know. Ignorance is simply unconsciousness to what we already know. So we must become conscious, because at the level, have you ever like had a revelation or some insight or epiphany? And what do you say when let's say somebody's explaining something, or you read something in a book, or you hear something on the news or something, and it's like an insight or epiphany? What do? You go, yeah, that's right, right? You say those words. Like sometimes I'll go, yes, I'll shake my head, yes, or I'll hear it. That means I already know it, right? Because it's resonating somewhere inside. I'm going, yes, I'm confirming, yes, that resonates, yes. So at that level of where you're saying yes from, is the place where you know everything. Does this make sense? I know this is a little bit metaphysical, or it's kind of out there for some of us. I get that. But does this ring true at all, at any level for you? Okay, I know I can't hear you because this is a podcast, but it's important to respond. So if this rings true of you, wherever you are when you're listening to this, just say yes. Just out loud. You can just go, yeah, it makes sense. Yep. You can shake your head. Yes. See, that's how you encourage and prime the pump, so to speak, of your intuition. You just become aware of that agreement. Yes, yes. Deep in there, yes. It's becoming aware of that place where you know something. What I would say is it's the place where you know everything. We have to become people who get acquainted with that, okay? So if you want to know what's going on, you must become conscious and aware. It has nothing to do with what's the trusted media source you can tune into, okay? Because again, the ability to know something's not coming from the outside of us, all right? I can't stress that enough. Okay, so intuition leads to infinite knowing. Okay, it's kind of a portal. The intuition will lead you into your heart, and that's the portal. That's the area of your being where you can really know everything. Okay. Next point I want to make is this: that information. Now, this is what we typically or supposedly supposed to get when we watch the news, or we do our own research. We are gathering information. Okay, but information is not knowledge. Let me say that again. Information is not knowledge. No, it's not. Information is not knowledge. Is no fear in love. Now, information can be very helpful. Information can be very helpful in the furtherance of knowledge, or the, solidification of your awareness of knowledge. But information is not knowledge. And many people, and this is where a lot of people kind of go off track here, is that a lot of people equate in gathering information with being informed. And that is just simply not correct. I want to correct that misassessment or a misunderstanding for us, as if you're listening to this. Gathering information does not make you informed. It doesn't. If you, true knowledge doesn't make you knowledgeable. I'll put it that way. True knowledge comes from the level of being. It's simply consciousness and awareness. It's where we know everything. Okay, you can have knowledge of something without having the information for something. So information can help you, in a rational sense, explain the knowledge. Information can help you communicate it. Information can help even solidify strategy and different things, how to navigate that knowledge. But information is not knowledge. And it's so important that you're aware of that, okay? So let's not equate the two. We've been equating that. We've been taught to equate the two. So we have a lot of people out here that have no knowledge, but they're trying to gather information, and this is where we're getting hoodwinked and manipulated and all this kind of thing, because we're getting information from untrustworthy sources, aka the news media, and people with all these different perspectives, and people are disconnected from their own intuition, their own heart, their own spirit, which is really where we need to be connected. Okay. Now I could tell you, I could give you a lot of information. Like I could turn this podcast into where I just share information that could be helpful. And yeah, maybe that would be helpful. That might be helpful for you. But I am more interested, especially in this episode, to communicate to you the power and importance of knowledge, which comes from you already have it all. You already have and possess the wellspring of infinite knowledge. It's called your own heart, your own consciousness, your own being. Okay? That's so important. Information is not knowledge. You can know something without having knowledge about it. Knowledge comes later. It's secondary. I think knowledge is important. I'm not negating knowledge. Okay, or I'm not negating information. Let me say it that way. You can know everything without having the information for it. You can know something without having the information. I'm not negating information. I'm not saying it's unimportant to have information. I'm just saying you need to connect to your knowledge source before you try to figure out what's going on by gathering information and fact-finding. Does this make sense? Does this make sense to you? Yes, just say it. Just say yes in your spirit. Wherever you're watching, you're driving in the car, you're listening to this, just say yep, totally makes sense. Because that's a way to, you're priming your heart. Okay, you're priming your knowledge center. Okay, just feel it. Can you feel it when you say yes? Yeah, I'm getting that. Notice where you feel it in your body. That's it right there. Okay. Now, here's why I'm saying that. That's so important, because you're going to watch things on the news, okay? You're going to watch things on the news, and there's going to be facts, information, what they call facts. They'll share information to you in such a way, and it'll be like, it makes logical sense, but it will violate your knowledge deep in your being. It won't sit well. It'll seem off. So so the question is, well, I don't know what to believe. No, you do know what to believe. Trust the intuition. Trust the heart. Trust the knowledge center, which is the core of your being. Okay? If something doesn't sit well with you, there's a reason for it. Okay? Now, a lot of people will just buy hook, line, and sinker what they're hearing on the news, because they're disconnected from their source, their knowledge source, which is their own heart, intuition, spirit. They're totally disconnected. That they're not aware. They're unconscious to it. And when I say disconnected, I'm not saying that it's not there. I'm just saying they're not aware of it. They're just so been conditioned and used to just following and chasing information, and for a lot of reasons. There's reasons for that. that they're not aware of who they are. They're not aware of their being, their essence. And so they're just totally taken for rides all the time. Very reactive. This comes out in the news, they react to it. This comes out in the news, they react to it. They're not grounded. Okay. We know those people. Okay. And maybe that's been us. No shame there. No judgment. That's not where we want. We can't stay there. We have to move into being people who are knowing, who are grounded in our being and our consciousness. Okay. So here, with that said, since information is not knowledge, but it can be helpful for the furtherance of knowledge, since we understand that, I think it's a great question to ask this question. It's a great time to ask this question. What do we know? What do we already know? Yeah. Like, let's ask that question. What do we already know right now? I know we have a purported pandemic going on. We have a lot of social unrest. But what is it that we really know right now? Okay. Here's what I want to tell you that I know. That fear is not real. That fear is simply a symptom of unawareness of the source, of your own source. Fear of being misled, fear of not being safe, fear of poverty, not having enough. Fear is not real. Fear does not make good decisions. So when I see our political leaders, our media apparatus encouraging people to make decisions rooted in fear, I know immediately that it's inappropriate and not trustworthy. Immediately. Fear is not real. We already know this. Secondly, because fear cannot coexist with love. Love is the fabric of existence. It's the fabric of the universe. It is literally the energy behind everything. And love is the antithesis of fear. So if love is the antithesis of fear, that needs to be what governs us. Okay, so if information is coming in that doesn't support that, or that's encouraging you to do something different, yeah, you just let that information go. It's not trustworthy. Okay, it's not based on knowledge. Yeah. Okay, the other thing I want to share about what is it that we already know. I want to say this is what I already know. Health is normative. Sickness is not normative. Let me say that again. Health is normative. Sickness is not. So much of our medical apparatus, our world system is just kind of governed with just sickness is the way it is. There's nothing you can really do about it. It's just kind of the thing we have to live with. But I just what I know based on what I know, my own experience is that health is something that your body knows how to do without you don't have to be taught. Like if you get a cut, no one had to teach your body how to heal the cut. It has your body. It's amazing how our bodies work. We have built into us intrinsic knowledge of how to heal itself. We're constantly repairing ourselves. We're healing. We're renewing. Our bodies are completely being renewed all the time on an effortless basis. The knowledge is already there. Health is normative. Okay. Well, I'm also aware that when health breaks down, it's because there's a block. Okay. Because that's abnormal. When health breaks down, it's abnormal. That means there's a misalignment. There's something getting in the way of the energy flow of how it works. Okay, so when it's suggested in the media or other places that healthy people are causing sicknesses to the world, that is, that's normative for just healthy people to inflict unhealth on the world. That is not, to me, that is inappropriate and not conducive to reality and anything that I know. And anyway, I could say a lot more about that, but health is normative. So when the script is being flipped and what's being presented is that unhealth is normative, so stay home, that you have to cover yourself up, this is abnormal. This is actually not based on any knowledge. Okay, another thing that I know is that people are inherently good. Yeah, I'm a strong believer in that. People are inherently good. So when there is suggestions that are made that people are inherently evil, racist, bad. Now, I'm not saying people don't do bad things. I'm not saying people don't do racist things. Yeah, there could be some behavior can be that way. But I'm very conscious about the suggestion that is made about a person's identity. Whenever an identity is being suggested that there are people who are not good, there are people who are racist, which is what we hear so much, the undertone of so much of our conversation in the media these days, and amongst other people, is the belief that some people are bad. This is the undertone of so much of the political discourse and debates that go on, is that certain people are bad. I don't believe it. I don't know that to be true. What I know to be true is that people, all people, are deeply and inherently good. I know this. Deep in my being, I know this. It doesn't even need to be proved. I am also aware that people behave in a way that's out of alignment with what the truth is, which is that we're good. Very good, actually. I agree with that verse in the Bible that says when God looked at everything that God had made, he said it's very good. Okay. Now this is a metaphor. I don't take that literally in that sense, but I do believe in the essence behind that, the spirit behind that, the metaphor of that is that, yes. I mean, I take a walk in the forest. You just look out in the forest and it's beautiful. It's good. Okay. The earth is good. This thing called life, it's so good. All right. So yeah, people can be out of alignment with that and behave in ways that are out of alignment that we may call evil or racist. But people aren't that. And that's missing from a lot of our discourse. Yeah. Yeah, it's missing. So we can know. So we need to come back to what we already know, which is our... And so next question, I want to end with this, okay? I want to end with this. Thank you for hopefully you're following me here with this, okay? Thank you for following me. And I hope, and if it doesn't make sense, please reach out to me because I believe this is a worthy conversation. Let me know. Send me an email to my, Jamal at jamaljivanjee.com. You can go to my website. You can message me there, however you do it, social media. You get a message to me and say, hey, what you were saying doesn't make any sense to me. Can you explain it? I will be happy to dialogue with you if when I have the time. I am quite busy, but when I have the time, I will. I tend to try to communicate with everybody. Okay. So with that said, I want to end on this one. Okay. What's the solution? What can we do about this? Okay. How do you connect to your infinite knowledge center? You ready for it? I'm going to tell you. It's just for free. It's amazing. It's for free. This is my gift to you. Okay. How do you connect to your infinite knowledge source so that you can be informed of what's real? Okay, I got one word for you. Breathe. Yeah, breathe. Now you might be saying, I breathe all the time. I'm breathing every moment. No. I don't mean like unconsciously breathe, like you're just naturally doing. I'm talking about focused, conscious, aware breath work. I want you to think about something. What have we learned since the beginning of this year? Okay? This is what I know to be true, by the way. We are getting messages. There are angels that are sending us messages this whole year. Have you heard the message? Coronavirus. What does it affect? Breathing. Yeah, you can't breathe. When the people who get sick, the people who have a cytokine response, which is a very small minority of people, by the way. Up to 96% of people who get this virus have no symptoms, asymptomatic. So even the flu virus sometimes affects people with more symptoms than this virus does. I want to say that is true information, by the way. That's just information. With that said, what is the coronavirus effect of people who have severe reactions to it? Yeah, breathing, respiratory distress, right? So there's something about breath there. It's a metaphor, but again, this is a metaphor. Even the George Floyd killing, the tragic killing of George Floyd by that police officer in Minneapolis, what did he say before he died? Yeah, I can't breathe. Yeah, isn't that interesting? It's breath. We have a theme here. Can't breathe. I believe that these are symptomatic. These are mirror metaphors to show us the condition of humanity. We have not breathed in a long time in a conscious way as a collective species. Yeah. It's time to breathe, people. It's time to come back and take some deep breaths. That's the solution. You know what the solution to racism is? Yeah, breathe. Consciousness, breathe. Don't just repeat the mantra, I can't breathe. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to do anything for anybody. Yeah, it's an injustice. What happened? It's an injustice that we don't consciously breathe every day. That's an injustice too. So how do you correct the injustice? Yeah, breathe. I can breathe. How about instead of saying I can't breathe to just repeat the injustice, how about we change the mantra to I can breathe? I can breathe. I'm alive and I can breathe today. Yeah, let's breathe. That's it. I can breathe. That's what you say to coronavirus. I can breathe. I am breathing. That's what you say to racism. I am breathing. Yeah, we're breathing. Let us be people who breathe and wake up to our infinite knowledge. Okay? Don't worry about the media circus. Disconnect from that. If you need to turn off the news, turn it off. It's a joke anyway. It is. It's not news. We need to come back to breath. Breathe deeply. We're going to be fine if we breathe. We're going to make this transition. There's a lot of, and we're not done yet, guys. I just want to tell you, there's more circus acts coming. We're in an election year. There's a lot going on, okay? A lot of the stuff is manipulated. There's more circus acts coming. It's almost, I know this to be true, okay? Breathe. We can breathe. Let's just breathe and remain grounded in infinite knowledge. We can do this, okay? Thank you for listening. If you're not on my mailing list, go to JamalJivanjee.com, scroll to the bottom, put your email address in there, click submit, you'll get on my mailing list. And I have a free Facebook group called Uprooting from the Poverty Mindset. I do live presentations in there, and I would love for you to be part of that group. Just do a search on Facebook for Uprooting from the Poverty Mindset. You'll have to answer like 3 questions, and then you'll get admitted to that group. All right? Thank you for listening. Hope this was helpful. Shoot me a message. Let me know if this was what your thoughts were, what your comments were, how this, I love the dialogue. It's important. And if you get a chance, it really helps if you go to iTunes and rate and review this podcast. You should be able to do that pretty easily on whatever platform you're using. You can just rate it and review it. That really helps the podcast get visibility. So I would really appreciate it if you do that. And thank you for being a part of this conversation. And until next time, we'll talk soon. Thanks.